You earn more than most people you know, more than your parents did at your age, and more than you ever thought you would. And somehow it still does not feel like enough. Not just not enough to retire, not enough to feel stable, not enough to stop the low-level financial anxiety that runs quietly in the background of almost every week. And the confusing part is that you know the numbers. You have read the books. You understand how compound interest works. And it still feels like this. That is not a knowledge problem. And it is not a discipline problem. It is a specific psychological mechanism that actually runs harder the more you earn, not softer. And once you understand how it works, you cannot unsee it. Here is what is actually happening in your psychology. There is a concept called relative deprivation. It describes the gap between what you have and what you feel you should have, based on the people you compare yourself to. And here is the critical thing about that gap. It is not fixed. It moves every time your reference group moves. When you were earning $30,000, you compared yourself to people earning $50,000. When you reached $50,000, the comparison had already shifted to people earning $80,000. When you reached $80,000, the comparison was at $120,000. The gap never closed because the reference point moved every time you did. Psychologists call the broader pattern the hedonic treadmill, but the mechanism underneath it is relative deprivation. You are not running towards wealth. You are running to close a gap that was never designed to close. Let me make this concrete with a real example. Imagine two neighbors living on the same street, in similar houses, on similar incomes. Neighbor A earns $70,000 a year. His immediate social group earns around $60,000. He feels comfortable, occasionally generous, financially stable. Neighbor B earns $110,000 a year. Her immediate social group earns around $130,000. She feels behind, stretched, like she is always almost there, but not quite. Same street, very different financial experience, not because of what they earn, but because of who they compare themselves to. Research by Urso Lutmer at Dartmouth found something remarkable. Neighbors' incomes affect life satisfaction more than your own income does. Read that again. How much the people around you earn affects how satisfied you feel about your own money more than how much you actually earn. The invisible force is not inflation, and it is not your spending habits. It is your reference group. Quick question for this audience. Think about the last pay rise you received. How long did the financial relief last before the new salary just became normal and the pressure came back? Comment, yes, if it lasted more than a month. Comment no if it was gone within a few weeks and the new number just became your new normal. I want to see the split in this audience. Now here is the number that most people find genuinely uncomfortable. Thomas Stanley spent decades studying wealthy Americans. His research, published in The Millionaire Next Door, found that most people who look wealthy are not, and most people who are genuinely wealthy do not look it. His data showed that the majority of truly wealthy people lived in ordinary neighborhoods, drove ordinary cars, wore ordinary clothes, not because they could not afford better, but because they had deliberately opted out of the comparison game. And here is the number. Research consistently shows that around 80% of millionaires in the United States are first generation. They did not inherit wealth. They built it. And the most common characteristic across that group was not income, and it was not investment strategy. It was a low reference group income. They earned well, but they compared themselves to people who earned less or to no one at all. The gap was never allowed to open, so the treadmill never started. Here is a distinction that almost nobody makes clearly enough. Income is what flows in. Wealth is what stays. They are not the same number, and they do not move together automatically. A person earning $50,000 and spending $40,000 is building $10,000 in wealth every year. A person earning $150,000 and spending $140,000 is building exactly the same. But the second person has a reference group consuming $150,000, and they feel behind every single month. Income grew, wealth barely moved, and the anxiety did not decrease. It increased because the gap grew with the income. This is why high earners feel financially stuck, not despite earning well, but because of the reference group that came with it. So what do you actually do with this? 3 specific interventions, each one targeting a different layer of the mechanism. Intervention 1. Redefine your reference group deliberately. The reference group your brain uses is largely formed by who you spend real time with and what content you consume. Both of those are more changeable than most people think. Spend more time with people who have genuinely opted out of the comparison game, not people who perform contentment, but people who actually have it. Your brain recalibrates its reference point from the people it spends real time with, not the people it aspires to. Intervention 2. Track wealth, not income. Once a month, one number. Everything you own minus everything you owe. That is your wealth number. If it grows, the system is working, regardless of what the reference group is doing. Your brain needs a scoreboard. Give it one that is not affected by what anyone else earns. Intervention 3. Define your enough number. The relative deprivation mechanism has no ceiling unless you build one. Decide in advance on a specific wealth number, a specific level of freedom that you will define as enough, not a moving goalpost. A fixed line that you choose before the comparison group can choose it for you. That line is the only thing that stops the treadmill. If you want to understand the psychology underneath all of this more deeply, Thomas Stanley's book, The Millionaire Next Door, is the most useful thing I have read on how wealth actually gets built by people who did not inherit it. The link is in the description and pinned in the comments below. The invisible force draining your bank account is not your spending habits, and it is not your discipline. It is a comparison mechanism that was never designed to make you feel like you have enough, because enough does not keep the treadmill running. The people who have built real wealth did not earn more than everyone else. They just stopped letting everyone else define what enough looked like. You earn well. The question is whether you are letting your reference group spend it for you. Save this one and send it to one person who earns well but still feels financially stuck. They need this more than most advice they will read this week. Subscribe if you are tired of knowing what to do and still not doing it. And if you want to understand exactly how your phone has been deliberately engineering that feeling of being behind, using your comparison instinct against your own bank account, that video is coming up next. I will see you there.